First on BBC One.
Good evening, fellow explorers, and welcome to episode 33 of the History CV of Britain. I'm your host, Paul, and this evening I'll be joined by Melissa Campbell of the Mercurial Pathways website and YouTube channel, and we'll be examining the St Michael and Mary lays over southern England and beyond, and trying to establish what our ancient British ancestors understood about the nature of these lays and why they were so important. Exciting stuff. But first, Jack the Ripper. So some of you may have seen my Jack the Ripper video I did. I interviewed Randy Williams, the man who I believe has solved the case after 137 years. Highly recommended. I really enjoyed it. He's coming back on the channel. The video was over 2 hours long, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that, but when you're trying to explain so much information and evidence, it's impossible to fit it into a an hour video. So part 2 will be shorter, I promise you that, and I'm hoping to do some more videos with Randy in the future. So I know some of you probably won't be interested in Jack the Ripper. It's probably a bit too recent for you, possibly, or a bit too grisly. But it is part of British history, and it involved a lot of political turmoil that was going on at the time, all sorts of stuff. And of course, these unfortunate women were living in just unfathomable poverty. And it really puts it into context, this was only 137 years ago, and people were literally starving to death on the streets of London. So anyway, highly recommend that. Book of the week, or possibly book of the century, which arrived yesterday by post, the second edition of The Origin of Numbers by Hugh Evans. And hold on a minute, look, where is it? You can probably see, there he is, look, me on the back. Hey, I'm extremely proud of that, as you can probably tell. And also, look, signed copy, and a foreword in the book, which is written by someone called Dr. John E. Hart, and he has said, "To all those who relish originality, I commend this book. The Origin of Numbers amply lives up to its title. In past ages, wandering scholars were obliged to rove far and wide in search of mighty patrons and their great libraries. In our own time, the need for patrons has lessened, and books and papers come to us online, often via open access. The National CVpedia of Britain is one such free resource, and if you haven't been on there, go and check it out. Best website on the internet. Ours is the golden age of independent scholarship." Yes, very true. "Hugh Evans is an audacious seeker after truth, exploring in companion volumes the zodiac and time. He is what I call a two-eyed scholar, surveying uninhibitedly the entire realm of relevant knowledge. One-eyed scholars cite selectively, having the other eye on peer acceptance, funding and preferment. But the monocular institutionalists no longer hold sway as they once did. Their time as arbiters has passed. The big contributions in historical studies are being made now by free spirits like Hugh Evans. For those who would transpierce the mystery of how our numbers got their names, look no further. This book is for you. So, great foreword written by John, and an even greater book. So, I'm actually looking forward to reading this more than I did the first time. I think because much of Hugh's information is now kind of filtered through into my brain, I understand the concepts a lot better. So, yeah, I can't wait to get cracking on that. Well done, Hugh. Congratulations. The Origin of Numbers, second edition. There we go. Brilliant. Right, okay. Just briefly, a couple of videos to mention. Oh, something else. Before I forget, I will forget this. So I'll mention it now. Not next weekend, but the weekend after, which is the 6th and 7th of September, I'm going to be at the Oxford Storytelling Festival. And hopefully, fingers crossed, because I don't know what the organisers will say about me asking to film certain things, but if it's possible, I'll be getting some footage of the event, which will include Millie Jackdaw. So I'll be meeting up with Millie at the event as well, and really looking forward to that. That may affect whether or not I can produce a live stream on the Sunday evening. That all depends on my travelling back from Oxford. So we'll see how it goes. But I do intend to do a CV episode on that Sunday evening, and I might be able to share, time permitting, some footage of the event as well. So that's hopefully something to look forward to. I know Millie is performing the whole of Merlin and the Pig, I believe. So look out for that. That should be good. Right, just a couple of videos to mention quickly, then I'll bring Melissa on. Adrian Gilbert has produced another lecture this week. This one's called England Awakens. Now, this is a lecture on how not just England, but the whole of the UK is taking back their country after many years of decline brought about by lazy, arrogant politicians and a compliant media. Those are Adrian's words. Adrian examines the sacred, essentially Christian ethos that underpins our culture and takes a close look at the symbology of flags that represent this ethos. And I've seen it, and it's excellent. So please don't, not now, watch the stream first, but when you get a chance, please do go over to Adrian Gilbert's YouTube channel called Adrian Gilbert and give it a watch, because Adrian is a very important part of this revised history and restoring and preserving our history. He's a big figure, so do please go and support him. He's doing some fantastic work, and I'm really looking forward to the final installment of the Secret of the Grail series, because the first 3 episodes have been absolutely fantastic. So do please go and check Adrian's channel out. One more video. Britain's Hidden History's Adam Griffiths has produced a video this week where he reads from a new unpublished work by Wilson and Blackett called How the King Arthur Research Developed. And he also announced that the Artorius Rex Discovered book, one that I read many years ago, is being republished by Hieroglyphics. So this is brilliant news. We really need to make sure that those books stay in print. So great news on that front. And that's about it. So don't forget to put that on your watch list. And I think I'm ready for Melissa. This has all been very last minute today. Or yesterday, really. But anyway, bear with me. Here we go. So please give a very warm welcome to Melissa Campbell. Hello, Melissa.
Paul. Hi, everyone.
How you doing? All right?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Paul.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I always enjoy listening to your research and information.
And I always enjoy listening to you. And
You're
your
the
show
one.
and
Thank you.
lovely guests.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to be talking about the St. Michael and Mary ley lines, leys, and their alignments.
Did you
But
say
before before we get going, can you give a brief explanation of what these lines actually are? Because I think some people might be quite new to this topic. So,
Well, it goes. The concept goes back to Alfred Watkins, and he was around about a century ago, and he observed that you could draw straight lines between churches and hilltops and other points on the landscapes. And he wondered why this would be, because if you're going to walk, for example, as a pilgrim between two sacred places, let's say, or two important churches, you don't actually need to take a totally straight line. But he noticed they were very, very straight, and he wondered why that was. So it all began with him, and then that term ley lines began with him because he observed that a lot of the place names that were on these lines that he was looking at ended with ley. So he thought, oh, maybe this means that they're part of a path, that they're part of some kind of deliberately placed public pathway alignment, if you like. So the thing is with these lays, should we call them, they are dead straight. And often these dead straight alignments are dismissed as rubbish because what would be the point? How could they ever been achieved? Are you suggesting that people in medieval times, stroke prehistory, were good at surveying? Yes. And then another thing is that some of the roads that have survived from a very long time ago that are very, very straight are associated with the Romans, because obviously they came into Britain and built roads or improved them. And it could be that those very same roads were also these alignments initially, and that they were basically just being improved on by the Romans. And anyway, so there's this idea, this concept of alignments between key places. Some of them are natural features, and some of them are churches, and some of them are actually very, very old. In fact, there could be stone circles and other prehistoric monuments. So in particular, the St. Michael lines, because there are several of them, seem to group together in a straight line. Church is dedicated to St. Michael, the Archangel Michael, obviously is the same person, but, well, angel, not really a saint. And then also sometimes St. Mary, St. Catherine, and also over in Ireland, St. Patrick. And it could be that these divine figures are all somehow connected to previous divine figures from previous religions and previous times. So these alignments connect stones and shrines and sacred places from lots of different eras. And that's another reason why they're dismissed. How could you possibly have a line that was deliberately made out of a prehistoric circle, a medieval church, and Avebury? It makes no sense. But it's very interesting to look into it and see if it actually does make sense, and to have a look at exactly what kinds of sites are on these lines and how precisely they're linked. So that's just a little overview of these lines. And for example, in the case of the so-called English St. Michael line on Mary, it goes from Cornwall to Norfolk, and along the way it goes through some really key places. So starting at, for example, St. Michael's Mount, but you can also start it at another place, Carnlesbill in Cornwall, also along the shore. And then it goes through the Hurlers, which is a Stone Age site, Glastonbury Tor, and really right through the centre, Borough Mump, Avebury, again right through the centre, or depending on how you draw it with Google Earth, to the slight, like to the outer perimeter, to the right or to the left, and all the way to Bury St Edmunds. So some of these do have an obvious Michael connection. Like Borough Mump has a ruined church to St. Michael on the top of this hill. It's kind of like a man-made or reshaped hill. And Glastonbury Tor, the same. It has a church dedicated to St. Michael on top. And it's also kind of like a shaped hill. Maybe the whole hill wasn't artificially made, but it's definitely been shaped. And actually the shape is kind of like an almond shape, and it sort of is in the direction of this line. Avebury is obviously man-made, and Bury St Edmunds is generally it's the most significant place on the other end of Avebury, And it's not associated with St. Michael as such, but it is a very important place. When St. Edmund or King Edmund was filled with arrows by the lovely Vikings, his body, he didn't actually die there. His body was taken there, presumably because it was an important site. And the church that's there now is actually on a hill called Angel Hill. So there could be a connection. So it's all about looking for these connections and trying to kind of like reverse engineer and think back to what may have been there before. Why were certain places then it made to be important during Christian times? And also we have Google Earth. So last time I was telling you we need to look up, but in this case we need to look down, and we need to look around, and we need to look at Google Earth.
Brilliant. That's a wonderful explanation. Thank you. You mentioned briefly during that orthodox science or modern day science doesn't really accept the concept of ley lines. But there are such things as telluric currents. So is there a connection between telluric currents and ley lines in any way at all?
Yeah, there can be. And a lot of people are really gifted with dowsing and sensing energies. And I think there's a link, but that's not the path that I've taken. Also, I think if you were to look at these energies, the telluric currents, as the sole explanation for these straight lines, it's difficult then to interpret then the very straightness of these lines and the precision, because nature isn't really that precise. And it seems to me that because these lines are so straight, that they're man-made. Okay. So I think that there's a connection to these, and many of the sites on these lines have important energies. Now, I'm rubbish at sensing these things, but so many people are brilliant at it, and they can sense things. Obviously, Avebury is a main one, and many of the churches. Again, this is very personal and very subjective, but a lot of people would sense things, and maybe there's underground water passing underneath some of these places. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why was that particular church placed there? You know, and sometimes it's that the places that are on these lines aren't in the middle of towns. Very often, in fact, they're basically kind of in the middle of nowhere, you know, and you kind of think, well, why was that church placed there? Why was that monument placed there? So I think it's a bit of both, but for me, the main explanation is that it's man-made.
Okay, brilliant. All right. I've seen some pretty amazing things on the ley line at Avebury. I've seen lots of orbs on these lines.
Right.
I've seen a Bogart, if you know what that is, which was very unexpected. I've seen all sorts of weird and magical things. So there must be a mystical dimension to these old paths. And were the ancients, do you think, plugging into something at all?
Yeah. I think that it's very difficult to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but you have to imagine a world where you're at one with the landscape, you're at one with the sky, you know the sky really, really well as well. You may be inclined to take a magic mushroom or two, and it's kind of about being really connected to nature so that you can sense these things. And I mean, I don't need to tell you how disconnected from nature we are, you know. It's much harder for us unless you have some kind of special talent, but we're always indoors and we're surrounded by like these electrical currents, and it's warping everything, and it's very hard for us to go out, and then we can't just suddenly switch it on. But I think definitely the ancients were in tune with something that's very difficult for us to be in tune with, and maybe it does need just spending a little bit of extra time outdoors and going to these places and just taking the time. But it also means switching off from internet, from computers, from all this. It's kind of like catch-22 really, because we're learning about it through, well, I'm learning about it through computers, through images, through data, through Google Earth. But I'm not going out there and I'm not sensing energies. And if I do, there's no hope for me. But obviously some people can.
Never say never, Melissa. Never say
never. But you just need the right teacher.
Maybe, yeah, Lawrence would be very good at that. Yeah. I remember Lawrence telling me he's walked leys, and when he gets to the end of a particular ley, he apparently sees lots of different colours in his third eye.
Wow.
So I was impressed by that.
So that's impressive, because that definitely, I mean, I totally believe that. And that would suggest that there's so much going on. But whether it's the experience of walking, whether it's the arrival at this particular place that has these energies, or the path itself, I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah. Okay. Just for the record, when I saw that Bogart at Avebury, I wasn't on magic mushrooms. My mum's watching. There we go. Is it possible, do you think, to estimate how old these lines are? So, Michael, Mary.
Well, yes and no, because there's a kind of a circularity in the argument. So if I were to tell you the oldest place on one of the Michael lines is this, and then there's also this, and this is really, really old, therefore the line is this old, it doesn't really work, because there's no way of proving that those old places have been intentionally placed along the line. So it's kind of one of those things where I can tell you that some of the places on the lines are very old, but it doesn't prove that the line is as old as the place. It's kind of tricky. However, there's another line that goes through France, basically the south of France. It's actually a line that links Bordeaux Cathedral, which is actually dedicated to St. Michael, with a whole load of Michael places along a line of latitude, as opposed to going up through, Cornwall and up to Norfolk. This particular Michael line is all about places that are on a particular line of latitude, and I can tell you about it later in terms of the logic of it. But the point is here that the caves of Lescaut are on this line, and two other sets of painted caves, like really impressive painted caves, are also on this line. I forget the names. I have them written. They're in my photos that I might share with you in a little bit.
Yeah.
Not Bruniquel, it's another two. Anyway, they're super old. And there is, okay, you're not going to find St. Michael there. That would have been nice. But what you do find, for example, in Lescaut, is bulls. And bulls are connected to St. Michael in a roundabout kind of way, because whenever in the stories since the 7th century of Michael churches being founded, important Michael centers and shrines being founded, there's always a bull involved. So, for example, two of the places in Italy, and the one on the Mont Saint Michel, there was a bishop, the Bishop of Avranches, the nearby town near Mont Saint Michel. He organized this whole fiasco with a bull, and kind of borrowed one of a peasant and popped it on the island, which had actually just newly become an island. I think I mentioned last time. And then he kind of got it to trample some grass and trample the dew on some grass at the particular spot. And then he's like, this is where we're going to build it. but in other places, there is a definite link to Michael places and bulls. So it could be that the bulls of Lescaut are connected to whatever this primordial deity was that started the whole thing, or it could be a total coincidence. So personally, I think it's very old. It's at least prehistoric, at least the age of Avebury, personally.
Nothing to do possibly with the age of Taurus?
I think the age of Taurus is too young. Because that age of Taurus is kind of like it's connected to the pyramids of Giza, which probably are older than the age of Taurus anyway. But I think it's too young. I think it's probably older than that, because if you're going to include places like Lescaut, then you're going way back.
Brilliant. All right.
I don't think you can put an upper level on how old this is going to be. There's and personally, I don't think you can say, well, humans just weren't bright enough in 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 BC. I think there's no evidence for that at all. So you kind of have to assume that it potentially could go back very, very far into the past.
Wow, nice one. Okay, take a breather for a minute. That was wonderful. I'm just going to put up a couple of quick comments from people who are joining us as we speak. Hello, Merlin's boy. Today I am mostly watching in my car. Okay, I hope you're not driving, Merlin. Good evening, Marshall. Nice to see you. We've got Lord Batty in the house, and we've got David J in the house. Good evening, David. Good evening to Robert Paul Corliss. Thank you for joining me. Stephen Lashbrook is with us. Good evening, Stephen. And we've got, this is a new name, Orwell's Bud. The Told You So guy. What a brilliant name. Greetings and felicitations, folks. Okay, brilliant. Okay, right. So everyone knows the drill by now. If you've got a question for Melissa, and I've got plenty more, can you please put them into capital letters for me so I can see them and distinguish them from the other comments? Brilliant. Okay. Right. Okay. I don't know when you want to bring on your information, Melissa, your screen share, but I was reading your article today on the St. Michael alignment, and on the one hand, we've got a plethora of historical paintings with angels and dragons that are clearly depicting some sort of sacred knowledge. And on the other hand, modern day science continues to knock back any suggestion that lasers are a real phenomena. So why do you think this is? What are they afraid of?
Well, what they're afraid of, I think it doesn't fit with the theories at the moment that people have in terms of human history. It's just that it doesn't fit. And also, I think that there's a tendency to interpret lines, these lines, I call them sunrise lines mostly, and these sacred places, not in terms of how sacred they were or some kind of magical conception of the world, but in terms of how useful they were. And often you see places interpreted in terms of its military promise, but it's not necessarily interpreted as beyond that. So, or people are very much interested in what was eaten and what they drank, and they kind of love to analyze people's teeth and see, oh well, they had a load of beef, and oh my god, here's a mouthful of mussel shells. It's just a different focus, and I don't know when exactly science moved away from being about just objectively verifiable facts, but it did, and it's now all about dogmas and theories that have to be adhered to as opposed to questioned. Not completely all about that, but sometimes, and definitely in the field of history and archaeology and ancient history, there's definitely that sense. So when you talked about those old paintings that I was sharing, I think maybe the ones you're talking about were the ones I was showing in relation to the constellation of Eucus, because I think that that's part of the story, but we can touch on that in a bit if you like.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, brilliant. Right, sorry, something's just cropped up in my studio. I'll get rid of that quickly. Brilliant. Right, okay. Okay, so why are these lines named after archangels? What's the connection with that, do you think?
Well, it's really just the one archangel. The others don't feature. It's just Michael. And so he has something special. And in the Bible, in the Ancient Testament, he's referred to as being like God. And his role as an archangel is to assist in, well, especially in the Christian context, to assist in getting the souls of the dead to where they need to be after the body has died, without the devil bothering them too much, without the devil snatching them. Sometimes you see, the way Michael often holds weighing scales with nothing on them, just as a kind of a symbol of balance, of equilibrium. But sometimes you see people on them, and then the devil's trying to snatch people off the scales, and his role is to try and protect them and get them to where they need to be. Obviously, some of them are going to get lost on the way. So he's a psychopomp, which is what this is about, the sense of ferrying or helping, assisting the souls of the dead travel to whatever's on the next route in the next world. And then he's also about, in the art anyway, trying to keep the equilibrium. So you see him holding these scales, and you see him very often pointing a spear into the mouth of a dragon or a devil at his feet that he's actually standing on, and then the spear goes through the mouth. It's always the mouth of the dragon or the devil. And this is probably about trying to keep some kind of balance. So it's about order versus chaos. It's about light versus darkness, and all the philosophies that come from that, in particular the Manichaeans and lots of there's actually quite a lot of sort of ancient religions and philosophies that are based on light and this sense of light bringing justice and knowledge, and then darkness being the opposite. And it's so obvious to us, in fact, even in most people listening here will probably have grown up in some kind of Christian religion, but in all the main monotheisms, there's this sense of light being about knowledge and balance and something that's good and desirable, and then chaos is the opposite, and it has to be kept at bay. Hence the Michael poking that lance into the figure below him. But the figure below is never entirely defeated. It's just about keeping a balance.
Okay. Sometimes Michael's arms and legs are depicted as sunbeams, aren't they? So
Yeah.
do you think there's a possibility that Michael is connected to earlier sun gods? Is he the same character as the Druids Apollo, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where it gets really interesting. So who is Michael? And in sense of what traditions does he come from, or she, because angels don't actually have a gender, and where are we going with this? Like, if we try and go back in time, where does it lead us? And there are so many other similar deities in that they seem to be also modeled on the constellation of Fucus, because you can kind of place them in the sky in relation to other constellations. So, for example, to go with that, the constellation of Fucus is sometimes called the third constellation of the zodiac, because there are 12 constellations officially through which the sun passes throughout the year, and then throughout another cycle that's much, much longer. And these are the main sort of ones that the sun passes through, but it actually does also pass through a little bit of Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus is the serpent bearer. You see him standing in front of you, facing you, holding this massive snake, which is actually a separate constellation, serpents. And this constellation is super important because it's in a part of the sky where at his feet, the Milky Way is running. So there's water at his feet. And sometimes you can see in images, even sometimes paintings that aren't even about Christian figures from the 16th, 17th century, you see water at an important person's feet in the arrangement of the painting, but other deities as well and divine figures. The center of the universe, the Milky Way is at his feet, literally. I mean, it's supposed to be in the constellation Sagittarius, but it's at the foot of Ophiuchus, at his, it's my right foot, right, at his right foot. And it's a really key part of the sky. And then he's holding the weighing scales, as we said. That's the constellation Libra. And then Scorpio is at his feet. Virgo is just over here, just the other side of Libra. So that would be Mary. And there are all these different sort of attributes that people have given these parts of the sky over the centuries and the millennia that corresponds to Michael, but then to other divine figures in other traditions. So, for example, there's Horus. Horus in the Egyptian tradition, he's the son of Isis and Osiris. He's a major, major god in the Egyptian figure, and sometimes he's a horrible old uncle as well. They're both seen spearing a serpent in the mouth. It's kind of a funny coincidence. There's St. George as well, that he's on horseback, but he's also seen spearing a serpent or a dragon in the mouth in the exact same place. There's always in the same arrangement. It's always kind of like down, if you like, if I'm with you, because it's down there, if you like. And it's kind of, there are so many similarities that there has to be a common ancestor to these traditions. And then coming into the sun, it's like you have to then kind of read it between the lines a little bit and see that the sun passes through this constellation. It's constellation 13 out of 12, as in it's kind of almost the one that's kind of in charge, the one that's overseeing the 12, almost like Jesus and the 12 at the Last Supper. And Jesus is definitely associated with the sun as well as the moon, but Horus also with the sun as well as the moon, and other divine figures that are connected to Ophiuchus. So this is kind of like our bridge, if you like. If you can connect Michael to the constellation of Ophiuchus, from there you can go to other divine figures, Apollo, and then one that's always kind of like associated with Ophiuchus is Asclepius. In the story, in the Greek myths, he's someone who was really good at bringing the dead back to life. Well, that's kind of impressive achievement. And then the gods got kind of annoyed because there was no one was dying anymore. So they got rid of him, popped him in the sky. Anyway, there are so many different ways in which this constellation of Fucus can be found in all the various myths around the world, not just to like Europe and the Middle East, but around the world. So definitely there's a sun connection.
Brilliant. Okay. You mentioned Christianity and Jesus a moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's possible, because we've covered a lot of early Christianity on the channel, do you think it's possible that early Christianity attempted to incorporate this ancient science rather than to vilify it?
Yeah. So it's interesting the way that Christianity was constructed, because it happened over a very long period of time. Like it wasn't just in like the first century at all, that like everything was decided upon. They had all these different councils kind of debating what should our position be on this, what should our position be on this. I'm thinking of a political party, but the way they had to come together, and it took centuries to agree on what was going to be okay, what was going to be banned and censored and destroyed. And meanwhile, I mean, you had these it's going to be unkind, but people like Gregory of Tours in early Christian times in France, going around destroying the 8 pagan temples. So there was a whole lot of destruction, obviously, and a lot of people were killed when they were pagans, and there was like kidnappings and ransoms in exchange for conversions, and promises in exchange for conversions, like we see with the story of the Vikings very often, So there was a lot of destruction, but yeah, a lot was kept, and it's very complex. I mean, you could look into it for a very long time and find all these different things, but there's a lot of continuity from obviously the Old Testament, so the Judaic traditions, and then there's a lot of continuity from ancient Egypt. And it's interesting, for example, even just to look at symbolism around the person of the Pope and all the things that he holds and lifts up, the sun and the moon on all these cups and things. Even his audience room in the Vatican, it's a newish building. It's 20th century in the shape of a snake's head.
I've seen that. Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's connected as well. I think it's not celebrating necessarily the chaos. I think it's about him, kind of like St. Michael. I mean, he's associated with St. Paul in Rome, but he's kind of like St. Michael. He's placing his feet on the head of the snake, the head of the dragon, and he's like, I am here, I am controlling chaos. I mean, that's just my interpretation, but yeah. So there are all sorts of ways that you can kind of trace, if you like, the development. Also, Christmas, it's kind of funny that Horus and Mithras have the same birthday, 3 days after the winter solstice. And then St. John the Baptist has
summer solstice,
birthday in 3 days after the summer solstice. So yeah, there's a lot going on that is borrowed and recycled and taken, not just the ideas, but also the places. And if a building was put up, for example, let's say in London, let's say St. Paul's Cathedral, why was it placed there? I mean, I am absolutely sure that it was important in prehistoric times, that particular site, near the bend of a river on a slightly raised site. But of course, where's the evidence? It's gone.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay. Lud Hill, wasn't it? I think Lud Hill is where St. Paul preached in this country.
Actually, yeah, and Lud or Lu, interesting, because that's connected to Lugh, it's connected to a sun deity. And a lot of the places that are associated with this line are connected with Lu. In particular in France, so there's Lugdunum, Lyon. Anyway.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, would you like to share your presentation with us now?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, I'll see if I can put it on screen for you. Hopefully everyone can see that now.
Okay, so I just put this together very quickly. It's basically just some images. So I can just recap what I said. This is Alfred Watkins. So he's the one who discovered these lays or came up with the idea. I'm sure people knew about them for a long time in centuries ago, but he kind of wrote a book about it and he popularized it. A few people, not just John Michel, but a few people picked up on that, including Catherine Maltwood. But of course, John Michel is much more famous. And in his book, The View Over Atlantis, I just have a quotation here. If I can, I can't read all this stuff on top, sorry. He said a sentiment which frequently occurs, particularly it seems to English poets and mystics, alludes to some intangible mystery concealed within the landscape, an aesthetic law which ever defies formation. Some have attempted to frame this law in poetry, others in works of science and philosophy, yet we still do not know why it is that certain spots on the Earth's surface are by general agreement more inspiring than others, or how it happens that these very places so often coincide with centers of prehistoric sanctity. So that's interesting because it's what you were saying about how a place can have these energies, and you can see strange things, and it's also about this link with prehistory, which can go back any number of centuries. And this is the cover of his book, The View Over Atlantis. And here he is. So he definitely popularized these ideas, and he wrote about these things. So you were asking about these energies. He wrote about these currents spiraling around the straight axis of the St. Michael line, forming the symbol of a serpent. And Asclepius, we talked about him. He's the one who used to bring people back from the dead, and then the gods got cross with him. So what Jean-Michel was doing is comparing the actual line with the rod of Asclepius. So this is this single rod with just one snake going round and round, and the head of the snake is at the spear. And this is what you see on sometimes pharmacies, and it's connected to medicine. And so he says these serpents represent these vital energies around the spine of the human body. So which is really interesting, because that then links us back to the Far East, and maybe we had these traditions here as well in Britain and Western Europe. I think we did. This sense of chi and energy. So it's really interesting. He says the line marks the backbone of southern England, energized by the vital currents of the earth. The sanctuaries on its course, where the two currents meet, such as Glastonbury and Avebury, can be seen as the chakra or nodal points in the subtle body of the landscape, its field of geomagnetic and other energies. So definitely what you're saying about energies. But then you still have this unresolved problem of why they're so straight, and why do they correspond to the sun, and how do they correspond to the sun. So then going down a little bit, I have a few more pictures to show. This is associated with the English line. This is what you often see if you look up the English Michael line. You get this line going right through the center, and it seems to kind of roughly bisect the angle formed by Cornwall, and right up to Norfolk, sorry. And then there's another very famous one. It goes from an island off the coast of Ireland down to Israel and through some key sites. Now, in fact, it's not as precise as that looks. I think it's deliberately a bit out of focus and blurry. It's like, oh, we'll just make it blurry. Here are these sites on Google Earth. See, it's not actually quite as precise as all that, but there are lots of important sites going through the north of France, especially. Then you have the Sacre San Michele and other sites going down to Israel. Here is St. Michael. He is a key figure. He's very often shown standing on the devil and a spear going through the devil's mouth. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, if this devil is the constellation Scorpio, that point there is the star Antares, which is the brightest star in that part of the sky.
Wow.
Here he is again in a Byzantine tradition. It's a gorgeous icon. Now, just to show that it's not always this sense of the lance, it's not always him digging down. There are variations on the theme, and sometimes you see him in a more kind of maybe Orion pose. There's still a dragon, but it's going to be kind of somewhere over there, and then he's holding a sword over his head like this, which may be a bit more Orion. And actually, there's a correspondence between Orion and Ophiuchus, because when you see one in the sky, you don't see the other, and they're both connected to the Milky Way and to the places where souls go to be absorbed into the afterlife and then come back out again. So that's interesting too. Here we have St. Michael hovering. Actually, this is more of the Orion pose, with the sword here. This is quite common as well. Hovering over the Mont Saint-Michel in France, just off the coast of Normandy. And then behind it, this is another mount here, Tombelaine, which there's a story of King Arthur and a girl who was abducted by the Duke Hole, and he was really horrible to her and she died, and then King Arthur got there too late. So Tombelaine could mean the tomb of Helen. It could also be about Belenus, sun god. It's not known for sure. And here is this amazing Mont Saint-Michel. It just is amazing when you think of it. You know, it's just there in the middle of a bay.
It's beautiful as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then it has a counterpart in England, which is this one, St. Michael's Mount. And they're both featured on these Michael alignments. So this one, the French one, is on a line that starts at Skellig Michael in Ireland, the coast of Kerry, down through St. Michael's Mount, and then to the Mont Saint-Michel, and then down. That's the one I showed you that goes through Europe and then to Israel. It's not 100% accurate that those three islands, Skellig, Michael's Mount, and Mont Saint-Michel, it's very close, but it's close enough to be significant, and they're all named after Michael, and they're all kind of like surprisingly important for craggy old rocks in the sea. Yeah, this is the English one then. This has an interesting history as well. So there's the whole tin history and trading. It's also featured in some Arthur stories. And then here we have, back to Mont Saint-Michel again. Here's Skellig Michael. So this is just off the coast of Ireland. And I don't know if you can see there, that's the mainland there. So it's much further from the mainland than the other two. Yeah. I mean, you can't walk to it at low tide like the other two, but this one, it's not that far either. And it's got these amazing beehive huts. And there was a monastery there.
That's not the place where they filmed Star Wars, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I thought so.
Star Wars connection.
I thought I recognised it.
Yeah. Luke Skywalker was there in his retirement years. Yeah, and then just in the last episode, when he what's her name? Thingy goes to get him off the island for one last battle.
Yeah.
So and that's kind of interesting as well, this sense of the battles, and I'm sure that's why they picked him, picked Skellig rather, and also it doesn't matter, but the Seth and the Sith, the Sith and the she meaning the witches and the fairies. Okay, so my take on all this is to kind of look at the reason why these lines are so straight. So here you can see that between Skellig and the Mont Saint-Michel, you can draw a straight line that goes very close to St. Michael's Mount, but not exactly through it, but it's still very, very close. And it's kind of almost in the center as well. So you can imagine a time, and this is something that Matt is very good at, imagine a time before these islands were flooded when perhaps they were all on dry land, They could have been hills, and you could have maybe been able to walk along them. And this would take us back, talking about age, take us back at least, I think, to 5, if not 8,000 BC. It's hard to know exactly. There's a link to Durham Cathedral, which is very important. Durham is kind of like an anchor point, which surprised me when I found it, but I'm fairly sure it is, because Durham is exactly the same distance from Skellig Michael and the Mont Saint-Michel. If you draw a line between the Mont Saint-Michel and Durham Cathedral, you go through the Thornborough Henges precisely. And if you draw a line between Durham Cathedral and Skellig, you'd go through Dublin city centre, including Trinity College Dublin, which who knows what was there in prehistory. Again, it's near a river, near a bay, there could have been something there. Why was that place chosen for a university? These are all these questions I'm always asking. I can never find out why. It's impossible. Here's another picture then, just to show you that. So the Thornborough Henges. And then this line here going from Thornborough to St. Michael's Mount goes exactly through the centre of Lundy Island, which is important in Robin Heath's work because it's on the same latitude as Stonehenge, and he's connected it to his 5, 12, 13 triangle. Anyway, I just wanted to show you briefly, this is another Michael line. It just runs along a line of latitude. Now, it's not exact, but these are really important Michael sites. There's the Basilica of Saint-Michel. I said cathedral, it's basilica. Then you have, one of the caves that's painted is the Grotte Fond de Gaume, which is here. Then we have Rouffignac as well. And then Rocamadour, which is a key rocky site. A lot of these places are rocky. And there's a sword, which apparently belonged to the Archangel. It's very difficult for an Archangel to have relics. So that, people depend on footsteps in the stone and markings and burnings in skulls, as in at Mont Saint-Michel, and swords in stones. So there's a sword in the stone here at Rocamadour that belongs to the angel and a church. Then going further here, we have Le Puy-en-Velay. So here we have two striking volcanic plugs, if you like, that the city is built around, and that were definitely important, at least in Roman times. On the top of one, you have a chapel dedicated to St. Michael. On the top of the other, you have a massive red iron statue dedicated to Mary. And this is another feature of the Michael and Mary Lions, that very often, not always, where you have something dedicated to St. Michael, you'll have something dedicated to St. Mary very close by. This is something Hugh knows all about, because I know he's done a lot of work on that. Then we have a mountain peak, which is called Pic Saint-Michel. So I don't think there's anything on it, but the mountain peak is dedicated to St. Michael. Then we have this Sacra di San Michele in the Alps. It's super famous. It's absolutely spectacular. It's not on the highest peak, but it's basically surrounded by very high peaks, snowy peaks. Then we have another one here, the Sacromonte di Crea. And then we have, well, it kind of tapers off a little bit, but there are a few other places going down into Romania. And then we have, this is just for context as well, there's a whole lot of lines that link a particular date, which we're going to come to now, because a key date at St. Michael's Mount is the 14th to 15th of May. And the reason for this date is that it links, so the equinox, it's kind of like a few days before the equinox, when night and day are equal, to the first day of the summer solstice. It's like the phi point between them. Phi is like a mathematical ratio, the golden ratio, the golden section. It's the phi point between them. And on that day, this phi point of the year, sunrise at St. Michael's Mount takes you to Avebury. So there is a whole load of other lines, just to show it's not a fluke, of 15th of May sunrises. This one takes you to Trinity and to Durham. This one takes you St. Michael Tumulus to this particular tumulus here. Chartres takes you to Meaux. Rouen is in this one as well. So it's not a fluke. There are these other 15th of May sunrise alignments. And for me, this is the key. It's the sunrise alignments. And just again, for context, here is Skellig. And on Michaelmas, or Michaelmas, the 29th of September, sunrise leads directly to Stonehenge.
Wow.
And on Michaelmas at Stonehenge, sunrise leads you directly to Brussels, where there is a cathedral to St. Michael. And again to Aachen in Germany, which used to be the capital of the Franks. So this one really took me by surprise. When I saw that, I was kind of like really taken aback. And because it's such a long way, there's a good bit of scope for that sunrise to fit. But if you take the sunrise azimuth from the previous day and the following day, it's way off. It has to be the 29th of September. So the 29th of September sunrise at Skellig takes you to Stonehenge. I don't know how it was done. I don't know. For me, it's significant because it's just too crazy to be a coincidence. But how does it work? How did they achieve it? It's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, it's so long. But I'm just showing you, and you can decide what you think. I know we're almost up to 8 o'clock, so I'll just show you a couple more images. This is the fact that the line runs through Lundy between Michael's Mount and Durham. And this is, again, more connections here. This massive triangle that's found between Durham, Skellig, and the Mont Saint-Michel. And I also just wanted to show you this one last thing. At St. Michael's Mount, there's another thing that's going on. And again, this is kind of for context, but it's all connected to the St. Michael line. I was telling you that on the 15th of May, sunrise points to the first moments of sunrise. The azimuth points to Avebury. And there's a slightly different day at St. Michael's Mount when the day of the number of hours of minutes, if you like, of daylight and nighttime of darkness are in phi ratio. And on that particular day in the summer, not the winter one, in the summer one, sunrise takes you to Stonehenge directly. And not only that, it has this lovely geometry, which is a so-called golden rectangle. So there we are. So we'll go back to the chat, and if you want to see more images, you can. But that's probably fine for now.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Thank you. I'll just stop sharing screen. Brilliant. Well done. Amazing stuff. Right. Okay. We've had quite a few questions from the audience, so I'll throw one or two your way, Melissa. The first one has come from Merlin's Boy, who says, if lays are not a thing, what's the reason given by experts?
Well, do you mean experts in academia? Because they don't exist. And experts in non-academic contexts, well, everyone has their favorite idea. For me, it's sunrise lines. For others, it's what I was telling you, John Michel said about, and you said also the telluric currents, the what is it, Asclepius, with these spiral energies running along. They're the main two kinds of things that you'll find.
This is like DNA as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, these spirals are very interesting. And of course, you can get a golden ratio spiral. It's not exactly the same, but you know, everyone's seen this with the series of rectangles in the spiral that goes around like this.
Brilliant stuff. Okay. Saturn Roostar. Hello, Saturn. I unfortunately slipped through my alarm to present the discovery of how the meter was derived. And like all the other measures, I discovered the method the ancients derived meter. We're in fairly controversial waters
We'll
here.
have to find out more about that some other time. To be fair, if you're in Australia, it's not easy. I sympathize.
Okay, Daniela Holland. Why is Michael called Saint Michael and not referred to as the Angel Michael?
I actually don't know. Maybe someone will know. Maybe Marshall will know.
Okay.
I don't know, because he's obviously not a saint. He doesn't have relics. He doesn't have bones. I mean, the Bishop of Avranches, when he founded his version, the Norman 7th century version of the sanctuary at the Mont Saint-Michel in France, he didn't have any relics, and he was very embarrassed by this. So he sent two guys off to Italy to try and find something. So they came back with a cape, and what was the other thing? And then his own skull, when he died, was found to have a hole in it at the back, and it's preserved still. And that hole is when the Archangel Michael touched him, you know, with the like beam of light. So it's very difficult. I think that he's kind of like very unique amongst archangels in that he just has this special status. But at the same time, he's not quite a saint, obviously, because he's not human. So I don't know.
Saturn Rooster is back. He said, when we think of ley lines, think about a guitar string. Well, I can do that. Pulled tight. They are straight. The meter is based on the monochord and how we space the frets. Oh, I didn't know that. That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So this is something Dane's been working on, which I'm dying to find out more about, and it's about harmonic ratios.
Okay. Rare Germ has asked, do you think St. Michael's related to Polaris or the old pole star Draco?
Yeah, so I was talking to you about the constellation of Fucus and Scorpio, which is that the constellation of Fucus's feet, and that would be the interpretation of a lot of the Michael, not all, but a lot of the Michael representations. So he's standing there, and he's got his spear, and he's digging down into the mouth of the dragon, who actually obviously sometimes just like, oh God, will you ever give it a rest? But there is another, well, there are actually several other serpents, but there's another major serpent in the sky around the pole star, and sometimes in medieval manuscripts it's drawn like this, you know, it's like just like an S, and it kind of is definitely part of that whole geometry that turns around the center of the North Celestial Pole. So it's really key. So I think that's another aspect, because this snake and Draco basically is another contender for what it is that Michael is actually spearing, and what he's, especially Apep, when in the Egyptian tradition, there's one picture of him spearing a snake in the mouth, and it's a really long snake. No, it's not exactly 1S. It's like, it goes like and then it goes on forever. He's in the solar boat, and then this. So definitely, it could be a connection. Basically, if you're looking at Michael in art, so from the medieval manuscripts, and then a little bit more recently, up until about the 16th century, at which point the traditions all change and everything is thrown out of the window, and new traditions and new things are there's a whole load of different imagery from that point. But if you look at those images, it seems to me that it's mostly based on Ophiuchus and Orion with the sword above the head. But yeah, definitely, I think there's something about the pole star, and then that will be about like basically the turning of the year, and then the great year, and other cycles.
Okay. Dark Commission has asked, might the curve of the Earth affect the straightness of the lines?
Yeah.
i.e. making points fit better? Plus, maps are a projection of 3D sphere to 2D.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something I found tricky in the beginning when I was looking at this, because I was trying to figure it out. It's like, oh my God, like how do I figure out? But Google Earth is actually really, really precise. Like I've compared the lines to some of those websites that you can input the coordinates and then see exactly the distance and whether they fit, whether the lines fit. And it actually is very good. They use the same model. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. I've really enjoyed this. I always learn so much when you come on. It's ridiculous. You give me a lot to think about. So thanks for that. Brilliant stuff.
Thank you.
Love to have you on again soon. Okay, so we're done pretty much there. So thank you all for joining me. Please do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll be back next week for episode 34 of the History CV of Britain. Thank you, Melissa. Cheers.